My name is Andrea Robertson, and I chose reentry into society. So, reentry is when inmates who have been incarcerated are reentering into society and they're trying to get jobs. But here's where it kind of got skewed. So, long term isolation is increased our mental health and substance use by 80% or homeless by 10. So, you can see listed the increase in our budget nationally to spend on mental health and substance use. And inmates are being released with PICS, which is post incarceration syndrome. And that is the leading cause with mental health and substance use treatments. So, how did isolation started? It started as an experiment in 1829 at the Eastern Philadelphia Penitentiary with the idea that if an inmate was isolated and prayed enough and repented enough that God would save them and they wouldn't be publicly executed. What would happen is the same thing that's happening today, mental health, the demise of inmates with suicide and self-harm. And the Supreme Court stepped in and said, enough is enough. But it reappeared. And in the 1980s, Supermax prisons started being built. The first one is Pelican Bay in California. So the cost is $81 billion a year on incarcerated individuals, and each individual that is in solitary confinement costs an extra 75,000. The United States houses an average of 122,000 restricted housing inmates. So these are the statistics. It's no longer about race. It is about redoing the system because the system is fractured. It's about allowing clinicians to treat both disorders and disease of addiction at the same time and find out how the insurances can bill, because of course everything boils down to money, and how we can get these people help. So here's the psychological effects of long-term isolation. So, and they use it as population control, out of sight, out of mind. You put somebody in a hole somewhere alone and you don't have to worry about it. And so this is what kind of like they give you a breakdown. So you have an 8 by 10 cell and you're allowed out for an hour a day. You have no human contact. They don't check on them regularly. The mental health providers they're pretty much, their hands are tied too because of administration and policy and procedures. So think about taking an animal, a dog, and isolating it, barely feeding it, not having any contact with it, and then letting it back out into society. So poor impulse control, anxiety, aggression, rage, emotional, cognitive psychosis, depression. Think about it. Like, take a human and do the same thing as you would to an animal, and what's going to happen? Like, it's going to blow up. So here's the stakeholders, right? Here's what it costs. It breaks down from going into jail, and then the prosecution, the public defenders, benefit packages, the policing, civil assets, all of it. And the other stakeholders that a lot of people don't know about are the employee unions. So the prison guards and the employees are benefiting from mass incarceration. Advocacy groups, which kind of shocked me. I knew politicians saw it as a way to get voted. And correctional vendors, inmates, attorneys, that really shocked me. And of course, religious groups, because we have to have that. Here's the stakeholders for successful reentry. You take a person, you get the county and the government involved, you get services involved, employment, a health center, law enforcement. Like, let's start educating law enforcement on what they're doing, and get them educated and skills training, like some kind of workforce, that because they've cut all the programs pretty much in Washington state, at least for rehabilitation. And then you have the biopsychosocial. This goes back to for clinicians especially. So assessments are tools that we use to find out where a client is with mental health, or where they're at with substance use. Where do we need to send them to inpatient, outpatient? But the common misconception is that you have to treat one first before you can treat the other, which is false. There's programs like Seeking Safety where you treat the trauma and the addiction at the same time. But where I live in Benton and Franklin County in the state of Washington, you have to have two licenses. You have to have two types, two specific educations to treat both. And then maybe if you're lucky, you can see the same client for both. So I chose the moral theory because a lot of people with addiction have shared with me in session that they feel like they're just bad people, like they have a moral deficiency, and that's not the truth. They have a disease. Um, the brain model reduces the stigma, like, okay, yeah, I have this disease, but I can do something different. I can, change my future. And that comes into the choice model. I can choose once I've been sober for a while to do something different, and I get to empower those people that I work with. Like, yes, you have choice now. You're not you're taking your medications. Like, where are you going in life? And let's do this together. I'll walk with you, but I won't do it for you. And so reducing recidivism, all of this is to help people not go back to prison. And this is all of it. And how do we do that? We vote. We get grants. So my call to action is that, yeah, we need prison, but however, we need to rehaul the system. And we need to get people into office, officials into office that want the same thing we do, change. We start with the families, we start with the individual, we go after the communities, and then we change state laws, we get grants, and we get officials in there, and then we go after Congress. So I want to thank you. I appreciate you listening to me.